Hello, everyone. This is Werner. Today, I want to share with you the GoldenGate secure deployment creation and also how to set up the distribution path using the SSL certificates. So during the GoldenGate deployment creation, you have a choice to choose whether you want to create a secure deployment or unsecure deployment. We already had the demo video on the unsecure deployment, and today's focus is to show you how to create a secure deployment and how to provide the certificates. The certificates we're going to use today are the root CA sign certificates, are not self-signed certificates. The reason I want to review this case is because it's a little bit complicated to set up the root CA signed certificate. For the self-signed certificate, we knew it's very easy. In this setup interface, you can basically just use the use certificate option to give it the PAM file. But for the root CA signed certificate, this option will not work well. We need to first create the wallets to hold the user certificate as well as the chained trusted certificate, and use that wallet to create the deployments. There is currently a enhancement for the GoldenGate product to use the PAM file directly in the future release during the OGGCA. But right now, the only way to make it work is use the wallet. Okay, and I know the most of users, when they get a certificate from their security team, they are not going to get a wallet, right? So they will get the certificate, the public certificate, the private key for their user certificate, and also the root CA certificate, or they also will get a bunch of intermediate trusted root certificate. So to convert that into the Oracle wallet, you need to follow the 3 steps I listed here, which is first to create an empty auto login Oracle wallet. And then you have to create the PKCS12 file by using all these certificate, the PAM file you have. And then once you get the PKCS12 file, then you can import this PKCS12 format file into the Oracle Auto Login wallet. And then you can use that in the OGGCA to set up the secure deployment. And to look for the detail on the steps, how to do these 3 steps, though I gave out all the commands and how to create the auto login wallet, how to build a PKCS12 file from our certificates, and how to import that into the Oracle wallet. So now I'm going to do a quick demo to show you how all these steps done. So here in this machine, the machine name is called Vulkan. I have 3 files, okay? And the first file is a root CA certificate. This is root certificate I use to sign my user certificate. So vulkan.cert, that is a PAM format certificate file. Vulkan.key, that is a primary key for my certificate. I am going to use this 3 file to build a PKCS12 file and then import that into the Oracle wallet. Okay, so the first step is to create a auto login wallet, which is empty. Just have the auto login attribute set on. So here is the command. Okay, the ORPKI is the utility to run, and wallet create and give it the wallet location here, and the option is auto login enabled. So it will ask you the password for this wallet. So let me put in the password and make sure the password matches. Then it will successfully create the empty wallet. So right now you look, the directory Vulkan wallet is created, and inside this directory, you will see all the Oracle wallet files there. But right now, this wallet is actually an empty wallet. There's no certificate, right? So the second step is we're going to create a PKCS12 file from the certificate we currently have. So to do that, here is a command. So we use OpenSSL command and tell it it's a PKCS12 format we want to export. And the export file will be the Vulkan P12. And the in key file is pointing to the private key of your certificate. And then the in is pointing to the certificate itself. Again, this is a PAM certificate, which is encoded in UU64. And I also have the chain command here to chain the trusted certificate. And the CA file is pointing to my root certificate. Here, if you have all the other intermediate certificate, you can actually concatenate them together in one file and then give it to the CA file. Okay, so that's the command. We'll create the PKCS12, and then we'll ask me for a password. You can just put in the password, and then you will see there's a P12 files created, and this file has all the information from all the three certificates, not the three files I currently have, right? One private key and one user certificate, one root certificate, okay? And so the next step is to get this file imported into the Oracle wallet. So then we have to use the Oracle PKI command to finish this particular step. Okay, so in this Oracle PKI command, it's a wallet import command. The import format is PKCS12, and pointing to where the wallet is, that's a directory of the Oracle wallet. And specify the PKCS12 file is the Vulkan.p12 we just created. And it will ask you the password for the wallet. This is the password that you use when you create this wallet. So you put in password. And then this is the password you give it when you export the certificate to the PKCS12, which is on this step. So make sure you also give that password correctly. Then it will tell you everything got executed successfully. So if now you look at the Vulkan wallet, you will see it actually have more contents in that. It has all the needed information in there. And if you want to check what exactly in this particular wallet, you can actually use the Oracle PKI command like this. So this command will basically to display everything from this wallet. There's a user certificate issued for the Vulkan, and it is signed by the Star Trek root. And the trusted certificate is the Star Trek root, which is basically self-signed CA root certificate in there. So that's the wallet you created. And we have to do the same because this is a server certificate, right? So to create the security deployment, you also have to do the same to the client certificate. I am not going to do exact the same steps, but I will just show you in here, I have a OGG client. I performed exactly the same steps. So right now I have a OGG client wallet already created with all the client certificate in there. Okay, so this is the client certificate. It's signed by the same root certificate, okay, and trust the same root certificate. And if you have multiple GoldenGate deployments in your environment, my recommendation is make sure all these certificates you issued for all the servers, their client, their server certificate, they signed by the same root certificate. Okay, that will make your life much easier because you only need to trust the same root certificate, then you can trust each other. Because the way we work is as long as we trust the root certificate, we trust every certificate that this root certificate is signed. Okay, so now we have both certificate in the wallet. then we can run the OGGCA to try to create the GoldenGate Service Manager and the GoldenGate deployment, right? So we run the OGGCA, and it will start the OGGCA, the web UI. Let me just move this to my screen here. Okay, so this is OGGCA web UI to help you to configure the GoldenGate. So the first step is we want to create a new service manager, and we have to choose a home for the new service manager. So for me, I'm going to create under public, and I'm going to create a new directory called Vulkan Secure Manager. Okay, this is my service manager location. We select this one, and the service will listen to the host name, which is Vulkan, on this local server, and I want to use the port 9300. This is for the service manager. And you do next, it will check whether that port is available, if there's someone else already using that. And if everything goes fine, come to the screen and let you choose, because a new service manager, assuming you are going to add a new GoldenGate deployment. And then you also have to give a deployment name. So let's just call it Vulkan Secure Deployment, okay? And the GoldenGate home, which is the binary where it was installed, I keep the same. We're using a 21.7. And the deployment home, the same thing. I'm going to go into the public and create a new directory called Vulkan Secure Deployment. Okay, and select that. And I will use everything as default. And then I have to also tell it the KNS admin directory, so I can use public. This can be pointed to anywhere, but you have to remember where you created that. But you can also change that later once the deployment is up and running. Okay. And the username, this one, I recommend you leave this on for the strong password protect. But since today I am doing the testing, so I'll just make my life easier. I'll just uncomment that. Again, in the production, I recommend you to enable that. So OGG admin, and give some simple password. And next. Here is the screen I showed you earlier. So because we want to use the secure deployment, you have to make sure the SSL TLS has been checked here. So it will ask you to choose a server wallet and a client wallet. Okay, so the server wallet, we just need to point that to where we initially created all this wallet. So in the Vulkan, we create a Vulkan wallet. Select the wallet location, and doing the same for the client wallet, which is under OGG client. Okay, again, you only select the directory. Okay, don't go into the directory, just select that entire directory. It will be able to recognize the wallet in there, and click next. And here it allows you to choose what kind of encryption options you want, and also the encryption cipher suites. So I just leave everything as default. And here again, it asks you to choose other ports, right? So the service manager is listening to 9300. So I am going to let the admin server to start using 9301. You click on another box, it automatically populate all the ports here, and I'll click enable monitoring. So the monitoring server will be created. So I will click the next to proceed to the next screen. And it will ask you the default schema. So just give it ggadmin. And now it just lets you review everything you have set up and all these the port numbers you assigned, the cyber switch you chose. So once you review everything looks good, you can choose to save the response file, or you can choose to just do the finish and it will set up everything. If you save the response file in the future, you can use the response file as a template to set up other deployment. So when you finish, it will just go ahead to set up all these directories, set up the service manager, set up the deployments, and everything's successful. So now if we come into the web page and try to log in to this Vulkan 9300, you'll see the service up running. Just have to put in the right password. Okay, so you log into the service manager, and if you check the certificate management, you will see in the service manager, we have the server certificate, which is the Vulkan, put in, and the trusted CA certificates is the Star Trek root. And this certificate management is a new enhancement in version 21 we introduced. So you don't have to mess around with the wallet. You can just come to here directly to update, add, replace any certificate. And keep in mind that there's two deployments here, right? The service manager is the deployment itself, and then you go to your real deployment, which the Vulkan security deployment will create it. So you will see this server certificate here, and the client certificate here as well. And this is the trusted root certificate. And if you are having this GoldenGate environment talking to other GoldenGate environment who is using a different set of certificate, you can add their CA certificate here as a trusted certificate. Then this environment will trust the other environment when you set up the distribution path, and vice versa. If you want to the other environment talk to this one, you also have to give them your root certificate so they can add that in their trusted certificate. You can click this add sign to add in all the root certificate you want, or you can replace the server certificate or the client certificate. So that is the conclusion of how you set up the secure deployment and how you put in the deployment, the certificate, the wallet as deployment. Now we have the deployment created. So the next, we're going to review how you set up the distribution path by using all these deployments. And to set up the distribution path, the most common way is, say you have two secure deployment, is you use the SSL, create the distribution path, and then you also need a user ID and a password to be authenticated on the target so you can connect. And then this is how the distribution server connect to the receiver server and establish the connection. So the first thing you need to do is, because both are the secured deployment, you have to make sure the root CA is presented as a trusted CA cert on both deployments, right? And in our case, I will make it simple because all my certificates are signed by the same root CA. So just make sure this root CA is a trusted certificate. The second step is to create a operator user in the target deployment. And you give that proper user ID password, and that is going to be used later by the source when it connects to the target, and the target is going to authenticate the user ID and password. And the third step is you have to create an alias on the source, because on the source, you do not want to put the user ID password in the plain text into the distribution path. Instead, you will refer to an alias, which is almost like connect to a database. You have the credential store, you create an alias, and then you store that user ID password under the alias. So when you create distribution path, use this alias to pass the user ID and the password to the target. And then when you create the distribution path in the distribution server on the source, you have to make sure you choose the WSS protocol, which will use the SSL. And you have to use the alias authentication method created from this previous step to tell the which alias that has the user ID password information there. And the last one is you have to make sure when you specify the host name for the target, that host name will match the CN name in the certificate or match one of the SAN name, which is the alternate network name, the secondary alternate network name specified in the certificate, because we're going to use that to verify whether the server we connected to is indeed where the certificate belongs. So once you have all this, in place, then you can start a distribution path. And this is how the distribution path is verified. So once initially you started to connect, the source will first present its client certificate to target, right? So target will check the client certificate, say whether I can trust it. In this particular case, I'm going to demo because it's signed by the same root CA. Basically, the target will trust root CA, so it will trust your client certificate. And then the target will present its server certificate back to the server, to the source, right? So the source will check if the host name of the dispatch matches the CN name or one of the SN names in this certificate. And if they do, and also if we do trust the certificate or the certificate is actually signed by the same root CA, then the target will, the source will actually trust the target. So this is a mutual trust, right? Source need to trust target, target need to trust source. And then the last step is once the connection established, the user ID password will be passed to the target receiver server to verify whether that user ID password has the proper privilege to log into this deployment to create all the trail files. So these are all three steps. Either one fail, then this connection will fail. Okay, so I'm going to show you a quick demo on this. I already have another deployment I set up, which is called a RISA. So I log into this service manager of RISA, and you can see this service manager, it uses a similar certificates. And if we go to the RISA deployment, it uses the server certificates RISA and also uses GG client, and it has a bunch of the trust CA certificate, and the one we're looking for is actually this, right? So the Star Trek root. So they are trusted in both deployment. And in this particular environment, which is right now I'm using as a source, let's go to the admin server, and I already have extract configured there. Although the extract already died, but I do have a bunch of trail files generated by this extract. So if you take a look at this extract checkpoint information, currently the sequence number 0 and offset. So there's a bunch of records already in there. So we can just try to set up a distribution path to send this trail file to the target, which is the Vulkan we just created. Okay, so this is the target. So on the target, we can see if we go to the receiver server, right now there's nothing in here, and the same on the source in this RISA. And if we go to the distribution server, and there's nothing created here either. So the first thing we need to do is on the target, we need to create a user. So on the Vulkan, which is the target, we go to the administration service. We can create a user. Go to administrator, right? And we add a user, call it GGS net. Okay, so this is a use for the GGS network connection operator. And so password. Okay. So this user will allow it to connect to the target as operator. And now on your source, which is RISA, right? And we are going to the administration service, go to the configuration. So under the credential, I'm going to create a credential user, okay? Teaching network. And you can ignore this. This is some other testing we did. So alias, we can call it see user to Vulkan, right? We just got Vulkan user and GGS net. And you have put in the exact same password. This GGS net, you give it on the source. So we can call it, just to make sure you give the right password. So you create this. Oh, password doesn't match. Okay, so this is a user alias we just created, right? And you don't put the GGS net there because that's a real username. And instead you use Vulkan user as the alias when you try to refer to this user. So now we go to the distribution path, distribution service. We're going to create a distribution path. And we call it RISA to Vulkan. So we have one extract. Once you select that, it automatically shows the trail file of this extract. And you want to use the user ID alias authentication. So you use WSSS, which enable the SSL. And the target host is actually Vulkan, right? So make sure this host name matches whatever in the certificate. The port number, that need to be port number for the target receiver server, right? So receiver server 9303. So you put in the 9303 here. And keep in mind, you have to make sure all these ports are open on the firewall, right? That's a different, network layer issue because if you don't open those ports, they cannot get connected. And leave the trail subdirectory by default. And the trail name, you can give a different name. Let's call it RR. And the domain, that is where the user we created. So if you go to here, the admin user, we create an alias. So if you go to the configuration, the alias is under domain GG network. You just put in the GG network here. And then the alias name is actually this name we create, Vulkan user, right? So we avoid to put any of the user ID password in there. And you can leave everything else as default, right? And then you just do create pass. And it will create this pass in your distribution server. And take a little bit while because I'm running everything on the VirtualBox on my Mac. So it's a little bit slow, but anyway, it just created. Then you can try to start it up. So when it try to start it up, it's going to try to connect to Vulkan. And it's successfully connected. And then if now you go back to Vulkan here, you go to the receiver service, you will see it will be automatically updated with this path, right? So you see that this is on the receiver side. So it actually received the trail and returned to the Vulkan, and you can actually see the details here. And it shows you how many bytes received and how many bytes reading out, and the bytes read, all this I/O information. And here on the distribution server, you can do the same. Go to the details. It actually tells you how much data it sent, right? And you can go to the statistics on the source. It tells you I actually sent 6,003 LCRs to the target, and the DMLs, 6,000 DMLs, and for which table. So that is how you use the distribution path to use the alias authentication to send everything to the source side, from source to the target using the WSS. Now we demoed how you set up the distribution path to show that, use the alias authentication to connect to the target side. And there's another way to do the distribution path is to do the certificate authentication. And in this particular case, we can see the certificate has already been added to the target. Okay, so if you go to the target administration service, you see this is the certificate. It's already added in there. And that is the certificate we are using on the source as a client to connect. So if you have a different client certificate, basically you just click add user and you choose the type to certificate. Then you basically copy paste the client certificate in here, right? And let's say we have a dummy one. We have another client certificate. We call it, let me just give you an example. We call it GG client 2, okay? And then you give it operator and the type, make sure you choose certificate, you do submit. Then it will put in this as another certificate user. Okay, so if you happen to have another client called GG or GG client 2, that's how you create this. So what will happen is instead of using the user ID password to authenticate, it will actually check what's your client certificate. If it matches the client certificate here, then it will allow you to log in. So this is just a different way to do the authentication. And so in this is high-level overview. Basically, you use a certificate authentication. So the only difference is you use the certificate authentication, okay? And you do not have to specify the alias anymore. So when it comes to target, instead of verify your alias, it will verify your client certificate to make sure it is allowed to log in. So now let's do a quick testing on using the certificate authentication. Okay, so again, on the distribution path, I can create another distribution path. Let's call it RISA cert to Vulkan. Okay, and the same thing, we choose the same extract, same trail file, the source trail file, and here just leave that certificate, and then the host Vulkan, and port number 9303, I believe. Yeah, 9303. And but you have to give a different trail name because you cannot use RR, it will overwrite. So let's call it MM. And the certificate, it allow you to choose which certificate you are using. Right now, we only have one certificate, right? One client certificate. If you have multiple one, you can choose from here. And this is the one which you already put into the target as a certificate user. Okay, and everything else will keep the same, and we'll just create the path. And then it will take some time to create this second path, which uses the client certificate to try to authenticate when we connect to the target. Okay, so now it is created. Let's go ahead, start it up. So keep in mind, in this certificate, in this distribution path, we didn't specify any user ID password, right? So now it's successfully created as well. If you go to the target, go to the receiver server, go review, you should be able to see there are two passes here. One is the original one, which use the user ID and the password to authenticate, and this is the one using the certificate to authenticate. Okay, so that basically concluded today's demo on how you create the WSS distribution path between two secure deployment, either using the alias authentication or using the certificate authentication. And thanks a lot for everyone for your time today, and hopefully this is helpful.